Hey, how's it going? How's everybody doing? This is another Tales from the Kitchen video. This is just a little bit of a breakdown of all the restaurants I had worked in that I can remember in my entire life, my 30 plus years career in the industry, which I am no longer a part of. I am so happy about that. Um, anyway, yeah, if you want to subscribe, like, comment, do all the usual fun YouTube kind of stuff. And look what I found! Look what I found! Let me do all that fun YouTube stuff. Help me get up to 1,000 subs. That would be outstanding. As you know, I'm not monetized. I'm just a nobody, little nobody guy on the internet that likes to post videos. Anyway, I'll put her down because she's gonna start getting cranky. But anyway, I'm gonna start from the beginning. Hopefully, this video won't be too long. Hopefully, it won't be too boring. Just a few stories and, like I said, places that I used to work at. First place I used to work at, actually, I just did a video recently talking about this, was actually McDonald's back when I was a teenager, like 5 lifetimes ago, it seems. But yeah, actually, if you want to just scroll down, it's Tales from the Kitchen number, whatever the last one was I did before this one. And there's all kinds of shenanigans and fun stories that happened while I was working there. But that was the first place I worked at. And yeah, I ended up getting fired after 2 years by Porn Stash Mike. That was the general manager at the time. Few things I got away with. That's all that's in the other video, so I'm not going to touch on that. And I do recommend checking it out because it's actually a pretty funny video. The shit we got away with, stuff I got away with at 15 years old, however old I was. I think it was 14 to 16. Working there, I was still pretty young, but yeah, that was not a bad place to work at the time. I don't know what it'd be like to work at a McDonald's now, and certainly would not. I'm not really interested in finding out personally. So, and no disrespect to anybody that works in the fast food industry at all. I'm not insulting it or anything like that. It's just not something I would have any interest in ever doing again, especially not being a teenager. But again, not knocking adults or anything like that. I don't want people to get the wrong idea. The first actual restaurant I worked at was called the Village Bistro, and I would have been 19 years old. I worked there for 1 year before the owner sold it. I also did a video about that. That was my first Tales from the Kitchen video. And it was this bigoted, cranky old Austrian man who's actually 12 years younger than I am now that owned the place. But it was my first experience in fine dining. I started off as a dishwasher, worked my way just learning salads and basic prep and stuff like that. And I remember, yeah, the guy was a jerk. And then this is a small town called Uxbridge, north of about 45-minute drive northeast of Toronto. And I had a friend at the time he wasn't working there, but we were hanging out. Outside there's the menu box outside the window, where you post the menus. And for whatever reason, my friend, I told him that the owner was an asshole. My friend ran out and punched. It was in the middle of the night, probably about 2 o'clock in the morning or somewhere, maybe it was only midnight. I don't know, but it was late enough in Uxbridge that there really wasn't anyone around. Like I said, at the time it's a small town. It was really small back then. Now it's got like subdivisions and all kinds of other stuff going on. It's really built up. Nice town overall. But anyway, he just got it in to punch through the menu glass. And when I came into work the next day, the owner never said anything to me, but the sous chef, this guy Tom, we were friends at the time. He was a good guy, and he told me, he asked me if I did it, and I said no. And he goes, "Oh, the owner, his name was Rudy. He was an asshole." He said that, he goes, "Well, Rudy thinks you did." I go, "Why would I do that?" And he goes, "You just think she did that." So at the end of my shift that night, and I was still just the dishwasher, basic salad guy. At the end of my shift, Rudy goes, are you going home?" However his accent is, I can't do it anymore. But I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Go right home. Don't stay out. Don't stay out on the streets." I was like, okay. And of course, I know what he's getting at, but he doesn't want to ask me if I did it or accuse me if I did it, because he knows I would lie anyway, even if I did do it, which I technically didn't. But then yeah, he ended up selling that restaurant. He lost a lot of business because he was an asshole. He would yell at his customers. He would not have it adequately staffed. He was talented in his craft. He was a good chef in terms of what he can cook, what he can make. I didn't really learn much from him because I was just starting out and I didn't intend to make a career out of working in kitchens. Hi, lemons. But yeah. Anyway, he sold it to Frank and Pierangelo, and this place was called. They changed the name to Ristorante Luna, changed the cuisine, gutted, and well, not gutted, but took out a lot of things in the kitchen, switched them all around. And this is where I actually started to learn how to cook a little bit. I was still basically the salad guy, and it was wasn't a bad place to work. Frank, I once in a while I might say hi to him on Facebook and stuff, but he's moved on to bigger and better things. And I've actually talked about him, touched on a couple of my memories with him here and there, and the restaurant. Later on, I'll mention this video that I worked with him or worked for him at when he was actually the sole owner at this point of it was the third restaurant I actually worked for him in. But the first one was Ristorante Luna, and I didn't really know what was going on. And I think Frank, he was still pretty young. He was only 31, 32 when I met him as an owner, and sometimes he can get pretty moody and stuff. But he over the years he'd still be moody, but I would say just he matured, mellowed a little bit, but still took his business seriously. But he wasn't quite. I'm gonna say snobby. If you see this video, Frank, you're a little bit of a snob back in the day, but we grew to love you anyway. Those were business hours, though. Off the clock, Frank was like to drink. He liked to have fun, and a lot of fun to be around and tell stories, and usually just make fun of his other business partners that I'll get to in a minute in a different restaurant. So yeah, I worked there for a couple of years, and then I moved out of Uxbridge, and they bought a second restaurant. And where did I go after that? I went to there's another small diner I worked at for a little while. It was my friend's parents' restaurant. That didn't last long. They brought me in to learn how to cook. I was only 19, I think, still at the time, to learn how to cook. Excuse me. I was working there on Sundays, and all they wanted me to do was be a dishwasher. I was like, no, I don't want to be a dishwasher. And they didn't have an actual dishwasher. It was the three sink hand method, which I really didn't want to get into. And I was doing a little bit of prep, but that didn't last because it was a pain in the ass to get there. It was out of town, but doesn't mean I'm still friends with the girl whose parents it was, and I always liked the parents too. It was just working there was just a pain in the ass. I can't remember what that place, Copper's Corners, I think it was called, or at least that was the address of it or something. But it's long gone, obviously. And then after Village Bistro, I want to say right after that, I went to, it would have been the second restaurant. Oh yeah, Le Gros on Main. Yeah, I was trying to think for a second. What order was I working in the restaurant? Yeah, Le Gros on Main. That was also Frank's. Frank was also the owner, him and Pierangelo, and then they took on another partner, this guy Chris, who's a complete fucking asshole, just to be blunt. I did a whole video about him and his idiot wife, called "Worst Scumbag Restaurant Owners Everywhere," or ever. I mean, so if you're ever interested in hearing about that, and that's only a part one. I do have a part two coming up about because these people treated their staff like garbage, especially when they bought out. Well, I don't want to say they, but especially when Chris bought out Frank and Pierangelo. Kind of did it in a shady way. I'm not going to get into that because it's really none of my business. In spite of how long ago it was, it's not really up to me to talk about that. But that being said, I will be doing a second part of that video eventually, hopefully sooner than later, talking about how me and maybe some of the other staff in a certain way might have gotten back at them. But when I was working there with Frank and Pierangelo, who were also the owners alongside of Chris, it wasn't that bad. It was actually kind of fun for the most part. A lot of late nights, it was weekends, and the usual restaurant crap. But there was a bar across the street. We used to go there like all the time. Frank's used to like to take us there on our lunch break and stuff. We'd have a bunch of beers, and then we'd come back half in the bag. And then Frank, being the owner, 7 o'clock would roll around. I'm gonna go home, guys. I'm just kind of hitting the wall. We're just like, why do I always let you do this to me? Why do I go there and get drunk just because you're paying for it? He would always buy it for us. Like he was generous that way. That's why I said like off the clock, he was a lot of fun. On the clock, business usually was business. But yeah, there were some funny stories, and most of them are about. If you go to that video, most of them are about Chris and Teresa and how they were just garbage people, like you know. And I'm not going to say her name, but their daughter now, basically, last I saw, was just showing pictures of her ass all over the internet. That was her thing. I don't know what it was for or what. Who knows? But again, none of my business, and I have absolutely nothing against her daughter. I'm just saying, yeah, you raised her well. Yeah, good job, guys. After that, I started doing the chain restaurant stuff after I quit because Chris and Teresa, they hired this bigoted chef, a different Frank. And I mentioned him in the video. He was a piece of garbage. And eventually, after he tried to start a fight with me in the kitchen in the morning and nobody was around, and then he ran away when I got right in his face, I ended up just quitting. I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm not coming to work every day and then to get into a fight with the chef who he wasn't a big guy, this chef. He was roughly my size, but he was a bully. So once you stood up to him, he kind of backed away. Didn't know how to react to that, I guess. But then I went to Montana's, which was fine. I'd never been to a chain restaurant before, and aside from McDonald's when I was like a kid. But at this point, I was pretty much. I mean, I wasn't a chef, but my skills were honed pretty good. So I went to Montana's, well, dry, and yeah, it was a totally new experience, whole new world for me. You go from independent fine dining to corporate chain where everything's in a package, everything's pre-portioned, um, completely different world. You got at that time I would have been mid 20s, 25, 26. And I got people my age that have less experience than me telling me what to do, how to do things, and when I can go home, when I can stay. Now my schedule is just based on how much money the restaurant's making. Whole completely different industry. And people were making fun of me because I kept referring to fine dining. We wouldn't do it like this. Fine dining went, and finally somebody said, "This isn't fine dining. Shut up." And I was actually hired as sous chef, or not sous chef. Sorry, assistant kitchen manager. But I still kept making these comparisons, and the one good thing is I got manager beers after work, so that was fine. And back then you could have as many as you like. There wasn't like a cutoff. It was, and then over time, the places I worked at, it went to as many to three, which was the standard, which makes sense. They don't want your staff sitting there because there were managers that would sit there and just pound them back, getting drunker and drunker the whole time. Like after work, just sitting at the bar, and it's really not a good look for your customers when you got a person who was managing and being all professional an hour ago, and now they're sliding off their stool and slurring their words. And so, from a business perspective, yeah, I can see why they would have done that cutoff 3, and that's it. Um, but yeah, but again, it was corporate, so there's so many rules you got to follow, and but I did stick around. And the reason I quit is because at that time Frank had his third restaurant, which was called Festa Ristorante, which I also just did a video recently about that. And all kinds of funny shenanigans happened there. I recommend checking that video. Did that one a couple months ago. So yeah, Tales from the Kitchen number very recently. I don't know the number, but check that one out. There's a lot of funny stories about that place. Not that it affected the business or anything. It was just the group of people that were working there, and it was an independent place. It was actually a lot of fun to work at. That's one restaurant I actually do really miss. I miss the staff. I'm still friends with not quite a couple of the people. Okay, one person that I talk to once in a while online because he doesn't live near me anymore. But but yeah, he bought that restaurant. He hired me. Frank had hired me there. At that point, he was the sole owner. He had 2 business partners, I think, before that. I'm not 100% sure because that was before I started working there. And then, I kind of changed a few things, a couple things for the better, a couple things. Frank was like, no, I don't like that. Change it back and whatever. But I actually did have a lot of fun. Frank was easy to work with then, too. I think because he was also, it might have been more expensive for him, but he was also the sole owner. So he didn't really have to listen to other people's bullshit. If you want to do something, he could do it because it's his restaurant at this point. And also the convenience for me is that I live right across the street, so I can, if I needed something I wanted to do the next day, I can just come in the middle of the night, do some prep, and go home. I had the key. Frank didn't care as long as, I turned everything off, didn't leave the gas on, which I did once, and then I came back and turned it off just by luck. And I mentioned that in that video, so check that video out. It's actually a pretty funny video. Where did I go after that? After that, oh, and there was a restaurant I got hired at briefly just before Frank had hired me. I can't remember the name of the restaurant. The owner was the father-in-law of a chef I'd once worked with, a guy named Dave, who I will be doing a video about him. Dave was an interesting character. I'm not really going to talk about that in this video, but I worked with him at La Grota, the second restaurant with the shitty owners. The second restaurant I worked with Frank, and then the shitty owners bought him out. And this restaurant, the guy hired me to be a chef, and then next thing he just wants to be a line cook, and he's telling me how to cook and do all this and that. And I'm just like, I know how to do this. But I'd only been there a couple days. He's not even telling me anything on the menu. They started pizza. I knew that, but I didn't know what stuff he wanted out for the pizza because I hadn't been, he didn't really walk through anything with me. And then I came in on my last day. I got hired again at Montana's. I quit Montana's to go to this restaurant. I was there a few days, went back to Montana, said, can you hire me? Am I able to come back? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. Except I didn't come back as assistant manager. Right, I did. I was, for some reason, that was a different Montana's I worked at that I'll get to. So yeah, he went to this other restaurant, and apparently I didn't pull something out for the pizza. And this was the day I was quitting. And the only reason I actually came in is because I left my uniform there. Otherwise, I wouldn't even have shown up. I would have just no-showed. So I came in, he's yelling at me, and I go, I didn't know anything about that. You didn't teach me, you didn't show me or tell me what you need out for this. You've never gone through. And then I stopped. I go, why am I even explaining this to you? And I grabbed my uniform. I go, I quit. I walked out the door. But if my uniform was there, I would have just no-showed. I wouldn't even have come in because this guy's incredibly rude to me. And I can't remember his name. I'm starting to lose the sunlight here. So, but anyway, yeah. And then after that, I went back to Montana's, and they rehired me pretty much on the spot. I'd only missed like a week of work anyway. Like that, my 2 weeks was just a week before that. And they're like, yeah, of course, come back because, I was doing a lot while I was there. So, and then shortly after that, I got hired back. That's when Frank had hired me at Festa Ristorante. So I'm doing all this by memory, as you can probably tell. And then after I quit, Frank closed. No, I quit, and I went back to Montana's again, but not as a manager, just as a cook. But I just said, "Oh, you guys hiring?" Because probably going to be quitting my job, which I already knew I was quitting my job, and on not bad circumstances at all. Like Frank was completely understanding. There was no hard feelings or anything like that. And we stayed friends afterwards. We hung out, went to the bar a couple of times after that, but he lived in Toronto. This was in Aurora, small town, or small city, big town. I don't know how you want to put it, just north of Toronto, but he lived in Toronto. I didn't. So sometimes he would come up, or while I still had the restaurant, I would come and hang out once in a while. But after that, I went to there, and then I went back there, and then some reason I quit. I can't remember. There was something going on that really pissed me off. Oh, I transferred to another store. That's to another Montana's that they needed some help at, and they said, "Oh, would you be willing to come here?" Which was fine because it was closer to my home. Because at this point, I moved to where I'm living now in Toronto, northern Toronto, and so I went to this other restaurant, this other Montana's, and it just turned into a shit show after a while, and I ended up going to Milestones, which is a sister company. It's the same umbrella company, but it's owned by the same corporation, I guess you could say. So I ended up going there, and that was ridiculous. It was so poorly managed. The general manager we had at the time was a bit of a, let's just say, probably had a little bit of CP in his collection, if you know what I mean. Uh-oh, someone knocked down Leatherface. But yeah, he was a creep. He ended up quitting, and then they brought in this other general manager. I remember her name was MJ or some shit like that. And this chick was batshit crazy out of her mind, to put it bluntly. So I ended up eventually quitting there. And then, strangely enough, I ended up back at Milestones, the one that was closer to my house. But at this time, it was run by former staff, and the general manager, he was like 24 years old, and he just had an ego about himself. He was one of these young kids. I was I was about 36 at the time, at this point, and he was just, oh, I know this, I know that. And he was like kind of a, oh, you talk about how big and strong he was. He wasn't that big and strong. He was bigger than me, but most people are. That's not really, this guy's Steve, and holy shit. And his brother worked there too, and his brother was the biggest snitch. You know, you tie your shoe the wrong way, and he's like, "Did you see how his shoes tied?" You know, it was just nuts. And usually they don't pair you up like that. They don't put the manager with a relative in the same store. They'll put the manager somewhere else. But for some reason, he was there, and it was just constant bullshit. And all the managers were young. There was one guy there. I can't remember his name. He was really just mouthy and ignorant. He was one of the, I think he was the bar manager. And I'm not making fun of anybody with Down syndrome or Down syndrome family members or anything like that, but he had, I'm going to say, for lack of a better term, Down syndrome face, like just big, like if you think of what a Down syndrome person looks like, that's what he kind of looked like. And some of the people would call him Downy. And I'm, like I said, I'm not making fun of people with Down syndrome by any means at all. It's, that's not something that's really funny, but it was just the fact that they were calling him that and he didn't get the reference. But this guy was an asshole. Like one time he started yelling at me and said, and I wish I had a smartphone at the time. This is before smartphones, and I could have been recording him. And he yelled at me and said, "I make him so sick he wants to throw up on me." He said this in front of everybody. He was like 22 years old, still living at home. This was like literally his first job. And what you got to understand about some of these managers they hire, when they hire them that young, they hire them that young because they can exploit them. They're going to hire a 22-year-old kid as a manager, a 23-year-old kid before they hire a 40-year-old who's been in the industry longer. And the reason is, not always, but the reason is they do that is because the 23-year-old kid, they can manipulate, pay them less money because they don't have enough experience or knowledge to realize they're getting fucked over and working 50, 60 hours a week under contract. They're too young to get that, where someone older understands that they're getting the short end of the stick and they're going to want more money or they're going to expect more. The younger people don't, because they just don't. And they have that ego about them, like, oh, I know this amount, that's why they made me a manager. It's like, that's not at all why they made you a manager, which is also another video. An upcoming video I'm going to do is about management and good managers versus bad managers, why certain managers are hired versus people that are more conditioned, I don't know the word I'm looking for, experienced, I guess, why they won't hire the experienced person over the young person who has minimal experience, just talking about stuff like that, managers you want to be, manager you don't want to be, et cetera, et cetera. But this guy was the manager you don't want to be. One time he was actually in the office with a friend who doesn't work there, safe wide open, and he's handing his friend, he's counting out the money, handing his friend the money to put in the safe. And if I had a smartphone then, and I'm not saying I'm a snitch, but this guy was a piece of crap and I couldn't care less about him, I would have recorded it, send it right to our, not HR per se, but like to our area supervisor and fired like that. It would just be an instant fire. First of all, he has his friend in the back area, which is a fireable offense. He has his friend in the office, which is a fireable offense. The safe's open while he's in the office, which is something that'll get you fired. Handing the money to his friend who doesn't work for the company and have him put the money in the safe. Everything there would get you fired just for doing one of those things. He did them all. He would have been fired instantly. Like no negotiation, no talking about it. They would have called him in and he would have been gone within 2 minutes. Told him the situation. See ya. And, but yeah, this was that kind of guy. He was also, one time he favored some of the staff over the others. I was the older guy and I got along with the staff. The managers had an issue with me. Mainly because I was telling them their mistakes, but they're 22, 23, I was 36, and I'd been doing this almost as long as a couple of them had been alive. When they were like little children, I was already in the industry. So they didn't really take that criticism too well. One time, one of the staff members were doing something they weren't supposed to do, and I went up to this manager. I really wish I can remember his name, but I went up to him and I told him, I go, so and so's doing this, and he just kind of like yawned and turned his back on me, like literally turned right around. And again, that's something that will get you fired, or at least a serious write up or demoted. Um, but yeah, that was Milestones. That was my experience at Milestones. No, sorry, Montana's. My third run at Montana's, I guess you could say. Where did I go after that? I know I bounced around a couple places for like a week here, week there, week after that. um, Geez, where did I go after that? Should have wrote this down. I didn't do any more fine dining. I went to would have been another chain. Oh, I know where it was. It was a place called Pogue Mahone, and I worked there for 5 years. The first few years were pretty good. It's right downtown Toronto, College and Young. Really have no hard feelings about that place. The last year I was there was shitty. They renovated the whole place. Went from classic Irish pub or English pub, I guess. I think they were Irish because their competitor company that I went to after that, they were British or English, whatever. And so after that, they renovated. They brought in a whole new management team. The manager was this guy Bobby, who I will be mentioning in that video about management. He was a complete piece of shit. The first shift I had when he kept us there, we did our usual cleaning that I've been doing the way I've been doing for 4 years. Said it wasn't good enough. Kept us there till 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 hours after we had closed, to re-clean everything. He'd never managed a restaurant before. He managed a Starbucks, and he expected the place to be absolutely spotless, like brand new looking at the end of the night. Now, anyone that's ever worked in the kitchen knows that that does not happen. You know, what you do is you do a whole clean, but once a shift, you take one area and you make that area spotless, and then the next day you do this area, and then you do this area, and you just go in a complete rotation. But you do your basic clean every night where everything's still clean, wiped down, sanitized, etc., floors mopped and all that stuff. But you go to one station, you clean all the dirt off and everything else. You get one person that takes care of that. Then the next day, another person takes care of like the fryers, and next someone does the flat top, and then another day someone will do the walk-in fridge, someone will do the walk-in freezer, and you just go in a continuous cycle that way. That's how it's done. Try to explain to him, and he goes no, and he wanted it shining every single night. And then I went to the chef, the new chef, this guy Jay, who wasn't a bad guy. I had no issues with him, but he told him, and then he told the chef that you can't do it like this. Like, I literally came in and gave my notice the next day. I was like, I'm not dealing with this shit. This guy's an asshole, has no experience, does not know what he's doing, has no clue what goes on in the kitchen. So anyway, after 5 years, I actually got hired at the company I was at after that. I was there for 6 years, and it was a place called Duke of Westminster. It's not there anymore. Shortly after COVID, it closed down because the company is also losing money, and I have no love for this company anyway, which I'll get to in a second. Anyway, I went there, and wow, this video is longer than I thought. I should have done it in 2 parts. But and if you watched this far, thank you so much. And you can see it's getting darker and darker. That's how long this video's been going on. But anyway, yeah, so I went to Duke of Westminster, and then COVID happened, and near the end of COVID, they bounced me around to a few different stores that they needed help at. They called me, I was off for 1.5 years collecting like the CERB and everything that the Canadian government was, helping the people out with. And then unemployment after that, excuse me. And then I ended up at one store, and for whatever reason, I was there for a while, and then they moved me to another store, which I was there for. Oh, I know what it was. I went to the one store just after COVID, and then when they reopened the restaurant, Westminster again, they moved me back to Westminster. But it was dead. There wasn't anything going on there at that point, so they decided they were going to close it down. Then they sent me to one of their oldest locations, or second oldest location, I don't know, called Duke of York. And I was there for 1 year, and it wasn't bad. It was all right. I mean, it was busy and that when it needed to be. But then after a year being there, a little more than a year, cats, they pulled me aside on my way in and just said, yeah, we don't need you anymore. And gave me my severance and bye. And I left. And So, I enjoyed the severance for a couple months, and then I got a job at a place in Kensington Market. I'm not going to mention the name. It's an independent place. I don't have any hard feelings about this place, but I got let go from there too after a couple months. There's about there it's uh different opinions on why I got let go, because I was told three reasons by the owner, but I was also told a couple days before I got let go that it was going to happen because somebody let it slip that I was probably quitting in a couple months because it was really slow, and I can't just get paid. I know it seems like a dream job just to sit down and look at YouTube all day or watch movies all day, waiting for the one or two things you're going to cook all day come in. But no, it was boring. It was driving me crazy. I'd be like, ugh, falling asleep. But and then after that, I got a place at Union Social, a place called Union Social. I was there for a couple months, and it wasn't too bad. I accept that it wasn't very busy, and I was only working. I only ended up working like 3 shifts, sometimes 4 shifts a week, even though I was on the schedule for 5. But it was so dead there that, And at this point, I'm like 50, and I got a 22-year-old girl managing the place, basically deciding whether I'm going to eat and pay the rent that month. It's like, and that's why also another reason why I hate corporate restaurants. This older guy with expenses, you might have a mortgage, you might have this and that, and you got a glorified teenager still living at home telling you that not to come in, basically telling you you're not making any money today. And then thankfully a friend of mine, Jason, have no problem saying his name. He pulled me all out of that in a sense. I told me where I can send my resume to the company that I work for now. And yeah, so, and then I got an interview. They hired me, and I've been there almost a year and a half now. And it's not a restaurant, it's a warehouse, but I've talked about it many times, posted a few short little videos here and there. And have absolutely no interest ever going back into another kitchen professionally. Um, but yeah, that's a breakdown of all the restaurants I worked in. I didn't expect it to go half an hour. I thought it'd be about maybe a 20-minute video, but I guess I was going to a few extra details more than expected, and I guess I also realized I worked in a lot more restaurants than I thought I did. But anyway, if you watched it all the way, hopefully it wasn't too boring. I mean, if you watched it all the way, I guess you were interested in what I had to say, and I really, really appreciate it. And again, if you haven't subscribed and you would like to help me get up to 1,000 subs, just a little goal for myself. Like, comment, do all that other fun stuff, and hopefully I'll have some more interesting videos coming up in the near future, even some of the restaurant ones. And I'm going to cut it off there, and thanks for watching, until the next one.